the Severe setup is here, and we have an early fight night card this weekend coming from Saudi Arabia. The UFC live from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia in Riyadh. The UFC goes there for the first time, I believe. Is this the first card that they're holding in Saudi Arabia, Harry? I know they've done Abu Dhabi's. I'm not too sure.
Dhabi's, I don't think they've done Saudi Arabia yet. But
they did one. They did one that was like, remember the one that they butchered earlier on, or was there one? There was one last year that there was a little bit of criticism about, or something like that. I can't remember. Anyway, if it is the first, if it's maybe the second, we know for sure they're there on Saturday. We were scheduled for a main event between Robert Whittaker and Khamzat Chimaev, a very, very exciting fight, one that I was highly anticipating. Sadly, we got the news it was a tough week for injuries last week. We had the UFC 303 card absolutely turned on its head. We had the main event of this card absolutely turned on his head in a matter of days. Khamzat Chimaev deathly ill, for the exact words of Dana White. We've seen the clips of him in the hospital, not looking too good, in an oxygen mask. And it just begs the question, Harry, I kind of, we did a breaking news podcast. I was kind of leaning towards this as well. Khamzat Chimaev might be the biggest what if in mixed martial arts if, he cannot bounce back. He seems to be always kind of, it's not even getting injured. It's just health. His health does not hold up when he's going through camps, when he's trying to cut weight. I would imagine it gets quite difficult for him. And it's a big, big worry in the career of a guy who, was destined to be a UFC champion when he first broke onto the scene in 2021, I believe it was. But it's sad, sad times for Khamzat Chimaev right now, isn't it?
I completely agree with you, Ian. No, it is so sad to watch. Like, we know, because Khamzat told us, that he's been suffering from long COVID for a while, right? And we know that, when you're suffering from any sort of illness like COVID or otherwise a respiratory type illness, it affects your immune system. It affects everything. And when you're really, really trying to push your body to the absolute limit, which is exactly what Khamzat Chimaev will be doing in order to try to compete with Robert Whittaker in Saudi Arabia, you are more prone to low immune system. And then when you're prone to low immune system, you are prone to these sorts of ailments in your health. And I just, I feel so sorry for Khamzat Chimaev. He is somebody that built up such a head of steam and such a following and such a sort of a mythos around him. And then we've not seen him, and we've not been able to see him. And, it also begs the question as to the Gilbert Burns fight, like how much did that take out of him, both of his body, right, and also out of his ability to continue to cut the weight, continue to make the weight, continue to train at the clip that he trains at. It's it's a really, really sad situation. Just as a fan, right? Just as a fan of Khamzat Chimaev, of mixed martial arts, it's a real shame. And equally from his side, right? Like, we don't know what his monetary situation is like. We don't know whether he really needs to get in there and be fighting to earn his clip. Like, we have no idea of his personal circumstances. And I just really hope that money specifically isn't an issue for Khamzat Chimaev, because if it is, this is a really, really tough situation to be in.
Yeah, definitely. And, we talking about the issues he's had. He was, at one time, for retirement before he came back as well. So it is a shame, and hopefully he does recover, because, it's, I think MMA is better when he's around. He's a good character. He's a very good fighter. Well, alas, he is out, and Ikram Aliskerov is in 15-1, Harry. And I'm going to put it to you like this. This is a guy who might not be well known. He's a guy who has picked up only 2 wins inside the octagon, and they've been played verbatim ahead of this fight. And that's a first-round knockout win over Phil Hawes, another first-round knockout win over Warley Alves. Obviously came from the Contender Series in 2022, picked up a Kimura win over Mario Sosa to win himself a UFC contract. This is a guy, Harry, that the UFC have been trying to push. In 2023, in July, he was lined up to fight Paulo Costa. Fight fell through. August of that was in July. I mean, in October of 2023, we saw him matched up against Nasruddin Imamov, a fight that also fell through. Then he fought Warley Alves. They tried to put him in there against Fluffy Hernandez at the start of this year. That fight fell through. He was scheduled not once but twice on last weekend's UFC card against Andrew Muniz, a fight that fell through, and also Antonio Tricoli. Obviously, fight was pulled because he did take this fight with Robert Whittaker. So the UFC has been attempting to try and entrust this guy into the kind of rankings in the middleweight division. They have got their chance now with Robert Whittaker, who obviously, is coming off of a win over Paulo Costa. Where do you see this fight? How do you see these guys matching up? And, we have to give credit for the UFC for pulling this one off and saving the main event here somewhat, because I think it does have potential to be a very exciting fight. Aliskerov likes to come forward, likes to land heavy shots. Robert Whittaker is the same. I'm curious to hear what you think before I give my 2 cents.
Sure. So I think Aliskerov is obviously still an unknown quantity at the elite level, right? You have mentioned some very, very elite names already in your introduction to this fight, and so it's obvious that UFC, because of the Khamzat sort of backstory, right? They are attempting to just grab the blueprint, which is Alex Pereira and Israel Adesanya, and then start to rebuild it in the UFC narrative, right? Smart marketing, smart as to what they're doing. However, obviously, Aliskerov has really struggled to get a fight that would then propel him into, let's say, a Saudi Arabia main event against somebody like Khamzat Chimaev. And obviously, Khamzat Chimaev has really struggled to get healthy enough that he can actually enter the cage and put a performance on. So all of those things accumulate into just being a sad state of affairs. But here we are. I think both Aliskerov and Robert Whittaker should be praised, as well as the UFC, for managing to pull this off. Robert Whittaker could have just turned around and said, I had Khamzat Chimaev. That was going to lead me to a title shot potentially. And I don't want this fella, like whoever the fuck this fella is. And so hopefully they backed out the big pay-per-view truck, and they said to Robert Whittaker, here's a bunch of cash. And they said the same to Aliskerov. And here we are with a main event that is potentially an even better fight than the one that we had to begin with. I think Aliskerov is a blistering fighter. It's very, very difficult to say what his level is because we haven't seen him fight somebody of Robert Whittaker's level. And equally, the UFC kind of know what they're doing here, where Robert Whittaker is certainly on the decline in his career. That's not to say that, he's finished or he's done or any of that rubbish, but it's just that Robert Whittaker is not the same Robert Whittaker that we may have seen sort of 3 to 4 years ago. And that's fine. But if Aliskerov is somebody that the UFC are looking to build, then, this is exactly the type of thing that you do, right? You take the massive name that he could probably get a leg over, and we find out. And in the same vein for Robert Whittaker, this is just another attempt to add a bedpost notch on what is an absolutely insane resume. When you run through the fighters that he has fought between 170 and 185, it is absolutely ludicrous.
100%. I politely disagree in the fact that you would say this is a better fight than what the Chimaev fight was, in terms of, I think it was a big test for Chimaev to kind of prove that he could get past a guy like Robert Whittaker. Likewise, it was a big test for Robert Whittaker to prove what you just said, that he's not dead and buried in his career so far. Now, this fight on paper, I would imagine, might play out a little bit more on the feet than what we would have seen Chimaev versus Robert Whittaker. And I think, it might turn out to be maybe a more entertaining fight on the night than maybe Chimaev and Robert Whittaker would have been. It's hard to kind of tell that, but nonetheless, credit to the two lads for stepping in there on short notice, and big opportunity for Aliskerov, big opportunity for Robert Whittaker. Look at, if the title aspirations, I say, if title aspirations are on the line in that Chimaev fight, they should still be on the damn line for Robert Whittaker if he goes out there and gets a win against this guy on Saturday afternoon. I was going to say Saturday night, but we'll be a little bit earlier as well. But yeah, interesting fight. Co-main event, heavyweight clash, Sergey Pavlovich versus Alexander Volkov, battle of two Russians, two heavy I was going to say two heavy hitters, but Pavlovich does hit like a truck. not so much for Volkov. And I think that might be the differential in this kind of co-main event, Harry. Would you think?
Yeah, I mean, with Volkov, he is obviously a voluminous sort of guy who tries to drown you with that range and with that length and with his size. Pavlovich says, I don't really give a shit about any of that, fella. I'm just going to come in and just fucking murk you. And I think for Volkov, we have seen sort of an uptick in his grappling in the last few fights. And I think it would be very, very, very smart for him to go right back to that against Pavlovich, because you certainly don't want to stand in the pocket with him. You certainly don't want to let him start to find his range. You certainly don't want to let him find that massive right hand, because you will be staring up at the ceiling and it will be a fucking horrific night for you. And so I think Volkov probably knows that this is sort of the Pavlovich rebuild is what we're looking at, right? Where the UFC know exactly what they're doing. They know that the Alexander Volkov isn't the quickest, isn't the hardest hitting, and does get clipped every now and again. And so they chuck him in against Pavlovich, and here we go, as they say in the cinema.
Yeah, absolutely. That a finish for Pavlovich here is that it's kind of like y'all must have forgot kind of a storyline here for Pavlovich, who, you know, obviously after taking the chance against Tom Aspinall at short notice didn't go his way. He's still a dangerous guy in the division, still one that is going to, I feel, remain in the top 5 for the next couple of years. Obviously, there's a bit of a backlog at the top of the division. We're waiting on Jones and Miocic. We're waiting on Tom Aspinall and Curtis Blades to happen. But, you know, it's Sergey Pavlovich. He's got 2 titles to hope for here, man. I mean, you know, a knockout here could put you in line for 1 or 2 or both, maybe. We don't know what the hell is happening here. But what we do know is, you know, I feel he's going to be coming in headhunting here. I would imagine Sergey Pavlovich is going to get this fight done inside 2 rounds. That would be my prediction for this fight. And I think that'll make it for an exciting fight. I mean, it might make for an interesting fight if he doesn't get out of there and we see him going into the later stages. And, you know, we know Volkov can kind of go into the later stages and make things difficult for heavyweights in the later stages of the fight. But an interesting fight. It's a heavyweight fight that I'm definitely looking forward to as well. We see the return of Kelvin Gastelum at 170 against Daniel Rodriguez. D-Rod, this, you know, potential banger here as well, Harry. I think, you know, both guys, I think D-Rod more so than Kelvin, but I would label both of these guys still quite a ways away from, you know, even starting a title run. I think this fight would get them kick-started if anything, but you wouldn't?
No, it wouldn't. There is no way that either of these boys are making a title run. Forget it. This is a
kickstart a title run. You don't get me wrong. Like, I mean, they're going to, whoever wins this is going to get a ranked opponent next.
Yeah, fine. But like, Kelvin still has to make the weight, you know? Like, I know that he made it last time, but making it once is one thing, right? We know and have seen ad nauseum that Kelvin Gastelum is somebody that is very, very, very difficult to trust on the scales. And so I don't trust him, right? If he comes in and he makes weight and he looks good, then we will be in for a very, very, very good fight, because Kelvin Gastelum and D-Rod complement each other really, really well. So, you know, I'm down for that. I'm happy to see it. I just hope that Kelvin can make the weight safely.
Yeah, well, I mean, he did against Sean Brady, but consistently making it is a big deal there as well. So, look, we can say one thing is that, you know, both of these guys are going to stand and bang, and I think that is going to make for an exciting fight here as well. Will it go all 3 rounds? That remains to be seen. Moving down, a guy that I've been a big fan of, and he's rise up through the UFC, has been Muhammad Naimov. He's coming in here against Felipe Lima at 145 pounds. What do you make of this fight, Harry?
Let's see if Naimov can last 15 minutes without cheating, is the question.
That's a solid point.
Like, I think he's a very good fighter. I think that he has plenty of skills everywhere. He hits hard. He looks like he's nice and compact when he's striking. He can obviously grapple. But when we have watched him, when we have seen him compete against specifically Nathaniel Wood, we have seen just some really, really, really horrific cheating, right? And that's just not something that I like at all. And I don't need to see it. I don't want to see it. And so I'm very interested to see how he looks as long as we don't see any of the cheating stuff.
Yeah, that will remain to be seen. He is coming in here against Felipe Lima. Obviously, he's coming in here as the Octagon Bantamweight champion and taking this fight on short notice as well. So we got to give credit. This guy is a good fighter, but might be a little bit too much too soon with not enough time to kind of get himself ready, and obviously fighting up a weight as well. But look, at the call comes, Harry. So you have the opportunity to get your foot in the door. You cannot criticize Felipe Lima for coming in here and taking that opportunity. Have you seen much of Lima at all in his rise?
I saw some highlights from a recent like Octagon show, but I've not watched fights in full yet. No, so this will be my first sort of introduction to him.
Indeed, yeah, it's a tough enough one to get him kicked off as well inside the UFC. Like I said, I would imagine most of his fights after this will probably take place at 135. But what a statement that he could make coming into the UFC, beating a guy like Naimov in up a weight class in the featherweight division as well. Moving down to kick off the main card, a banger, an absolute banger to kick off the main card in Saudi Arabia. Johnny Walker of SBG takes on Volkan Ozdemir. I mean, like, we could just say the same thing about Johnny Walker each and every time he goes in there now at this stage, Harry. It's like, can he find the balance between that level of composure and technical ability and that level of mad bastardry? He seems to teeter one way or the other, and there's no balance in there as well. And you don't want to be going in there being a wild man against a guy like Volkan Ozdemir, who does have the punching power to kind of put your lights out, as well as, we've seen Johnny Walker fall into that trap. I think this is a fight that Johnny Walker can win, but he's going to have to fight very smartly to do so. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think, you know what? Maybe this is me being cynical now, but like, when I watch or know that Johnny Walker is going to fight, I actually don't ask the question of can he find the balance, because he can't. Like, he absolutely can't. He either is going in and he goes full wild man, or he's going in and he's fighting a technical, measured, considered fight. And I think if we see technical, measured, considered, it ups his chances of winning this fight. I do think that there is a chance that he goes out there, because he is such a wild man when he is being a wild man, and he clips Volkan with something and puts him away. We've seen Volkan finished before. We know that, it doesn't take the most amount of power to put him away. And we also know that Johnny Walker hits like a fucking truck as well. And so I would not be shocked here if Johnny Walker gets the win. I wouldn't be shocked if he finishes Volkan Ozdemir. I also wouldn't be shocked if we see a finish from Volkan on Johnny. But it will be a fun fight. Make no mistake about it. It will be a fun fight.
Absolutely. Like, as the main card lines up, there's a lot of exciting fights on it. A lot of potential finishes on the main card. Would you agree, Harry?
I'd agree completely there, Ian. Yeah.
I bet you would. All right. Nasrat Hasparas, Jared Gordon is the prelims headliner. No, excuse me. It's the one I wonder. It's Shara Magomedov versus Joelton Lutterbach at 185 is the prelim headliner. 12-0 for Magomedov. A scary individual. What do you think he can do in here against the much more experienced opponent this time around, Harry?
We're going to find out. I'm not ready to make a decision on Sharapov yet. I still need to see much more of him. Sorry, Magomedov. I just, my head went to Zabit for a second. I don't know why, but yeah, Magomedov. I still need to see more from him. Like, I wasn't blown away by his UFC debut, but here we have a guy who has come in and has taken the fight, and his entrance to the UFC. We're going to see some stuff, and fair play to him. Fair play to him.
This guy has been around the block. He's been obviously, over in M1 in Russia. He's had a stint in Cage Warriors. He's had a stint in KSW with a loss to Dricus du Plessis. Wins over Alex Lahora that's a good win for him to have. Finds himself all the way back up in the middleweight division now. Has fought a couple of fights at lightweight as well, of course. The stint, his last fight was over a year ago. In Brave, has had an array of kickboxing, modified rules kickboxing, and straight boxing, and one karate fight as well, maybe multiple. This guy is It's like Jean-Claude Van Damme coming in here. He's been fighting here, there, and everywhere, and under maximum amount of rule sets. So this guy is going to be able to come in and bang with SevereMMA. Maybe that'll make the fight exciting, but maybe Magomedov will want to take him down and dominate him off his back as well. It'll be interesting to see how that goes as well. But this guy is a Joelton Lutterbach, interesting individual. I'm looking forward to seeing him. Haven't seen all too much of him, but we'll get the chance to on Saturday night as well. Moving on down, another fight that I'm looking forward to on this prelims card. Obviously, I mentioned Nasrat Haqparast versus Jared Gordon. It's an all right fight. It's a well-matched fight, but yeah, one that wouldn't really get the juices flowing for me if I'm being completely honest. But one that does get the juices flowing for me is Rinat Fakhretdinov versus Nicholas Dalby. Now, that's a bona fide banger in the 170-pound division. I'm sure you're looking forward to that one too.
If that's not fight of the night, we've had an excellent, excellent, excellent night, because both of those men don't know how to take a back step. Nicholas Dalby has really, really come into his own over the sort of last 3 to 5 fights. Hasn't always put the performances on that he has necessarily been proud of, but he has really sort of rounded his skill set into the fighter that he is going to be for the rest of his career. And that can only be something that we should be happy for him for. Fakhretdinov, I am really quite high on. I think he is a very, very, very solid fighter. Some excellent grappling, hits really hard. I'm high on Fakhretdinov, and I think Dalby is a really good test for him. We know that Dalby is super gritty, super grindy, got some really powerful kicks, can grapple himself, iron chin on the man. And so, yeah, I think this is a great fight, an absolute banger.
Yeah, absolutely. Another Tajikistan guy is going to be matching up here with Kung Ho Kang. Obviously coming off a loss to Syed Nurmagomedov, Muin Gafurov. Looked all right in his UFC debut. Obviously came up against Saeed in his last fight. And yeah, I mean, it's no shame. Yeah, he's just average, and going in here against another average guy as well. I just remember every time I see the Tajikistan boys fighting in there, the video when they both fought on the same card, and they had the football stadium full of fans there. So it always sticks out to me as well. Magomed Gatsi Yazulov takes on Bredson Ribeiro at 205. I just wanted to say that guy's name to see if I could say it, and I think I absolutely fucking nailed it too, to be honest. But Gatsi Yazulov coming in at 8-0 into the UFC after a big win on the Contender Series. It'll be a wonder to see if he can keep that run alive. Cedric Dumas versus Dennis Talulan at 185. Not a great card, or not a great fight that either. It's getting the arm of death. We haven't seen that in quite some time. Zhao Long versus Chan Ho Lee is the bantamweight road to UFC finale, I believe, which will kick us off on the card. And that wraps us up for the card from top to tail. Overall, pretty decent card. I think they have matched this card, Harry. They have matched this card for entertainment purposes. I think they want to give the Saudis blood. I know the Saudis do have a lust for that. Sorry, puts his head in his hand there. But yeah, overall thoughts on that, Harry?
We're not going to make it tonight, lad. What are you talking about?
yeah.
No, I think I agree. Look, whenever the UFC tries to break into a new market or tries to sort of open up its doors to another country or another scene, they always bring something that those fans would enjoy. There's names that those fans know. There are matchups that will provide entertainment, will provide value. I don't think this is new scripting from the UFC, right? This is something that we certainly have seen before and will absolutely see again. I'm just glad that the UFC is taking shows on the road to new areas, and that people are actually getting to see these fighters. That's the main thing for me.
Yeah, but like I would be play devil's advocate over there, is that most of the shows that I've seen over in Saudi Arabia has been dead as a doornail, to be honest. I think some of these fights are not going to get the same level of fan appreciation, and it's just the style of the way in that area of the world that they like to enjoy and take in fights. I think the exact same thing could be said about Japanese MMA back in the day, where you had that respect and the focus on the fighters and their abilities, where they're not shouting and roaring and mooing and going mad. But, if this is the continuation or start of the relationship between UFC and Saudi Arabia, it's going to be very interesting to see where it goes, because there's some big money there, Harry, and obviously Saudis are already tied in with the PFL coming in here now as well with the UFC. If they are happy with what they get, we could see this happen time and time again. We could see some big fights, as we've seen over in Abu Dhabi as well. But the Saudis are becoming major players in combat sports, aren't they? And it's going to get super interesting over the next number of years to see how it progresses. How do you think, maybe to finish off on this, how do you think and how can you see it progressing over the next couple of years? And is it something that you want to see? A loaded question.
That feels like we're edging into our political beliefs there, right? And I think the answer to that is relatively obvious. I think, the Saudis seem to be baked into lots and lots of different elements of sport, whether it's golf, whether it's the PFL, whether it's elements of football. It seems as though there are nefarious elements to that. I say that with absolutely zero evidence, and I'll whack a big allegedly on there. But it doesn't feel as though, like you say, the UFC turn up to Abu Dhabi or Saudi Arabia or whatever, and we could be proved wrong on Saturday night, but it feels as though they're turning up and this is a political statement from the Saudi Arabia kingdom, rather than it's the fans clamoring online for the UFC to be taking their product to Saudi Arabia and its population. So we will see. I really hope that the Saudis come out and enjoy what will be a fantastic UFC card, at least on paper. But in terms of what I see the future as, it is very likely to be a continuation of what we've seen in other sport, and I'm not sure that that's necessarily to the positive of that sport.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment as well. If you wanted to drag some positives out, it is a big money business, but most of that big money is going to the UFC and not really finding its way into the fighters' pockets too. And I think that's something, that can't be said with the introduction of them into boxing. I think, there have been some pretty hefty paydays over there in Saudi Arabia. They put on some banging cards as well, but, it's pick your poison kind of a thing, isn't it? So with the dealings over there and how it's run over in that country as well. So it'll be interesting to see how it does progress and how much of a stranglehold that they do get on mixed martial arts. I think, they're well on their way in boxing, with talks of them trying to take over all of the organizations. There is a pretty big deal right now. One I personally think is not a good idea. And I think with the UFC, it's going to be hard to not have that partnership, but I hope it's not. I hope not all of the big fights will end up over there eventually. I hope that it is, like you said, spread out fairly across the world when it comes to it. But look, we'll break down this fight in full. We may share some more thoughts on that as we get more of these cards as well. But that's been the Severe Setup at BJJ_Harry Powell at O'Neill MMA is where you'll catch us. We'll be back for the breakdown next week to break down these fights in full. Take care.